So as we enter into July of 1916, big piles, lots more replacements. The English, I think I said something about this earlier, and maybe I set it up and gave them a lot more replacements, but now they're getting nearly one a turn, which is humongous, largely because it's been the replacement points that have forced the Brits to attack so far. Mainly the foreign replacement points, but now, unlike the French, they don't have a huge pile of reserves. They can delay for another month, maybe, but they're going to have to start grinding out some losses, and that's going to make this sector, which the Allies are very strong in, one that has to conduct more battles than otherwise. I may have to shift the artillery up to help defend Paris, just to take some of those losses. Remember, each artillery loss gives me eats up 2 replacement points, so that's kind of nice. It also eats up 2 demoralization points, which is not so nice, but the English have a lot. They're, only at 200 and something losses. They have not committed hard yet, as opposed to the French and Germans, who mainly lost their stuff in the first year of the war. That's when most of the losses happened. We haven't seen anything like that happening since then. Again, ahistorical as hell, but the truth of the matter is the supplies just aren't in there to continue the battle. You could push it and try to drive the supplies down so far, and I think maybe that's the historical occurrence, but like many things, like the big offensives, the game doesn't really seem to promote the idea of pushing those big offensives. They can happen. You could just keep hammering the same couple hexes again and again and again. But chances are that the screw-ups are going to happen elsewhere, not where the enemy is focused. So you want to open the offensive up somewhere else. Likewise, you could drive your supply values down so low that you no longer can support your attack completely. And if you manage to drive your opponent down at the same time, it doesn't hurt you. You get that grinding losses. On the bright side, what we are seeing is, unlike La Grande Guerre, we're seeing these armies still at full health most of the time. So there's definitely a trade-off there. We'll have to see how this plays out and what decisions the Allies start to make, because they're going to, at least with the Brits, get reinforcements to a level which they don't have the supplies to support, I think. Now, other people change too. The French are down to 1 a turn again. Remember the typo on that. And that one I believe I looked up, and it was the same in the silver edition, which no longer exists online. The German replacements have a similar typo on them here. First, second, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh turns of the month, they get 1. On the 6th turn, they get 2. Well, wait, the 6th is in both. The 3rd's been left out. My guesstimate is they get the 2 on the 3rd. It doesn't really matter unless I'm completely misestimating what's supposed to happen there. Nobody's near that shaken morale, which is good, because it shouldn't be coming close yet. The French are at the closest at, 1,200. And the Germans, I got to pump 65 more points for them. And then I have to make sure that I don't have any trenches that need to be dug. I think I still have a few that need to be finished off this turn. So, working our way into July here. Germans set up another assault on here. And the Allies are really looking at this as, this is bleeding them. The not assault, but a bombardment. And not only did they lose the rest of their artillery in place, now they got more to funnel in, but how much can they lose there? They're also started getting the fort itself chewed into. That's down to a 3 strength point. It's becoming less and less important as an additional defense in that zone. Of course, once the fort's destroyed, that doesn't mean the space falls. It's still as well defended as the rest of the line, really. So, I don't know, in terms of some overall strategic advantage to destroying that fort, there really isn't one. But there's a morale advantage, and there's a huge advantage in wrecking the artillery that the French have been putting into place. When they get this big guy up there, they're going to be able to do some damage back. But this last one, I think it was They took like 12 losses. Much of that, 9 of that, or no, 6 of that was, maybe it was 9 losses. 6 of that was artillery, so that's 12, some 15 points or so of demoralization. Germans took 2 losses, which works out to 4, because that obviously had to be artillery getting hit by the counter battery. But yeah, that's not a good trade-off for the Allies. And they're spending supply that, well, they're going to get a wash of it. The Germans are getting less supply now. They're only getting 40 per turn. I may have given them too much last turn. Again, I blame it on having to deal with the booklet and paging back and trying to find, oh, which month does this change in? Some games have some nice play aids to help you determine those kind of things. And there's no question somebody could print this kind of thing out. A cheat sheet of important dates, whatever. I've done it for other games that meant a lot to me. Usually not on the first playing, though. Usually it takes me a playing or a second, one playing to discover, wow, this would really be helpful, and a second playing to finally get around to actually producing a little scrap cheat sheet for myself of what I need. Yeah, I'm kind of slow in that. So, but I don't know how I'd rework this entire set of order of battle and such not so that it would be usable to me. It would be a significant amount of effort and involve a lot more notation. Probably just penciling some things in, but it's just a pain in the ass the way it's set up. But the other thing that was brought up recently, something I think I mentioned in passing in one of the videos, and I'll try to remember it for the final review. You got all these channel ports open. Now they got numbers on them that I've got no idea what that number means. That's meant for some other rules that aren't included in this particular edition, in this particular box. It could be World War II stuff. It could be whatever. But I'll tell you what's not here. There's no ability for the Brits to land, and this is what was pointed out, in the ports within the rules. And that's creating an unrealistic situation, completely unrealistic. For all that detail and everything, they left that out. And why? Well, because this game was never meant to be played as the campaign. The West Front campaign was not meant to be done. It's becoming very, very obvious to me. The game is designed to reproduce very carefully historical decisions. If you do everything historically, I think you'll get a historical disposition. And I think that's how it was tested. Players fine-tuned it. The designer fine-tuned it based on players' reports back as to, yeah, if I push with about the amount of force that was used, we do get historical results. But you saw things like the race to the sea happen. I know that one of the big proponents for this game stated, you wouldn't have enough troops to do that early like in so many other games. Well, bullshit, I did. You know, my natural predisposition to how to play said closing my flanks was important, perhaps early. Did I lose ground for that? Well, it's hard to tell with the Belgian situation, but I certainly made a lot of ground with the Germans by doing that early. Well, this is another one where this very focused design of, yeah, let's follow the historical path and make sure it works, and not bothering to put invasion rules in play to make this Western Front for the duration make sense. Because if the Germans swept through Calais and left this all empty, it would be conquered. Now, you could say, well, that's an abstraction. You know, there's probably something garrisoning there or whatever. Or maybe the German Navy's been able to slip out and patrol up to there. I don't know. I really don't know. You can make up things. But the tight focus of this game is on producing those scenarios, playing the scenarios out properly. And I really doubt that anybody worked the campaign through enough, because any playtesters would come back, first of all, with a huge complaint about trying to deal with this thing within it. But also, and this game's been around for a long time, the Silver Edition does not improve upon this tremendously. It cleans up a few little minor, inconsistencies and errors, and things like the Belgians being stuck back there. But it doesn't worry about this. Now, I'm sure if you played the Grand Campaign, not this game, but the Grand Campaign, I'm sure that there are naval rules within some of the scenarios. Gallipoli, for example, you'd need naval rules for that to even make sense. There were no end runs historically on the West Front. So, mainly because the Brits held almost the entirety of the coastal area. There was no need for it. So, given that, this represents every scenario that they wanted to represent without representing all the possibilities that would come into play in a historical fashion. But within some of the other modules, there's no question that there's some kind of naval rules, and they could probably be adapted and faked to adjudge to this. And I'm sure in the campaign game, there's enough detail on the naval rules to actually allow you to plot your own invasions, etc. So if you got the whole boat, you could do this front in a better manner, I'm sure. But it's kind of, I don't know, it feels a little wanky. It feels like I don't have what this game purports to be. It is not the West Front for that entire period. It's the West Front limited, which is to say, if you don't follow the historical path and if you don't get fairly historical results out of it, if you end up with that race to the sea too early, well, the game's not able to handle reasonable historical projections of what would happen. So, excuse me. This is really developing into a serious conundrum for the Allies. They keep pumping the artillery in. They keep taking heavier losses. Those losses are expensive. They're actually eating up that 65 a month that the Germans have. The Germans have their solution now. This is working. If they destroy the Paris fortress and they destroy the artillery there, there isn't another clear location to place. But the French don't feel like they can just give this up without a cost, although the cost is growing higher than the fortification is probably worth. At this point, the fortification is only like 5 demoralization points left. And if it's destroyed, it's not like that hex is really that vulnerable, although it is the most vulnerable hex probably on the entire front, because if the Germans get rid of that fortification down there, the French are able, you'll have to excuse me, I have some kind of palsy affecting my hand, which is running bitch with this this game with its big stacks. I've been drinking too much coffee. But if the French do not, if they give this up, then they're going to be facing a 4-hex assault with all the artillery in place against Paris with a lot to lose. And once that falls, who knows? It's very hard for me to judge. Can the Germans take this with all the force that they have in place against it? It's going to be a tough nut to crack, but the French feel like they have to defend it for some reason. The defense is eating up French supplies, though, too. The French are forced to spend their supply points on defending this, and artillery supply is expensive. The Germans are thrilled to spend theirs. They want to get rid of theirs. This is the most cost-effective attack that they've been making in a long time. The problem is, if the French turn around and make an assault, now the English have the ability to, but let's not worry about them. They're kind of delaying. They've got a limited number of points. They want to try to build up as much as they can to the maximum, as I usually do, and try to get a lucky punch, in which case they'll be able to follow it up maybe with some extension of the front, although that hasn't really happened even with when the lucky punches have happened. But on the English side, that front's been pretty static the entire game. They just haven't, even though they have a lot of troops, they're facing the mass of the German army up there. The German army's weaker along the French fronts, but the French don't have the excess troops. Now, I could devote more of Paris over to an English-held territory, and I may have to, but already I've got half of Paris there, or more than half. I've only got 1 hex that's defended by the French, and or I could try to shift an English sector and build it somewhere else. I don't know how much value there is to that, except in muddying the situation. But this is really, really a tough call as to what to do here, because I'd like to launch an attack and get the better return on my investment. But in a sense, you don't want to launch that attack, especially as the Germans still are withdrawing troops this month. Although maybe they're getting more than they're withdrawing. Look at the chart over here. Let's take a quick look, and most of what they're getting are just replacement points. So what they're withdrawing is going to maybe shake things up a little bit. And I kind of don't want to hit before optimal circumstances come on the front when my supplies aren't even at a point where they're pushing that instance. And my replacements aren't either, because I'm able to spend them on building all these poor artillery back up. The Germans are also able to spend theirs on the artillery, and they're very, very pleased with what's going on right here. Still continuing the bombardment. I'm up halfway through the 6th turn of July already. It's just been rolling on. This is the first turn where the losses actually, the Germans took more. They're not really able to sustain their full artillery battery on there. And they got a bad roll combination this time. The French got a 6, they got a 2. Both are at +2. +2 for the French because of the city. The Germans would be at +4 for all the hexes they have, -2 for the city. So it kind of... I hope I've got that right. Urban hex is not urban hex, but... shit, it's supposed to be doubled or halved. I've been doing this wrong. Probably works out about the same. Let's see, 21 at +4 now. I've been cheating heavily in favor of the Germans here, so yeah, this isn't going to work out as well as it's been working. Too bad. Oh well. And you also double the counterattacker strength, which I haven't been counting in there, instead of the +2 for the French, which would help them. So honestly, this is not the big payoff that it's been seeming. I'm leaving it alone. But yeah, with the way it is, if the French can keep a big stack in there, the Germans really can't get their massive firepower advantage on there. And there's nowhere else they can get that hook. So this sort of automatic progress, which I've been so happy to be doing for some time, I don't know when I came to the decision that it was that way, turns out to be bogus. And, well, I guess that takes away the Allied problem there. I'm not sure what to do about it. This is what happens when, I try to play something like this over an extended period of time. It's just, I've got to look everything up each time. I don't want to do that, so I take shortcuts. And it's the shortcuts that are killing me with a lot of things, not following the rules, trying to, play these pieces so they're more reasonable. This, what the hell was it? This English Navy, that Marine unit that I had talked about before. Well, I beefed that thing up, and now it got withdrawn at 2 strength points and brought back at 7. It was allowed to be beefed up according to the rules, but I have no idea what to do with those extra strength points. I guess they were just lost and eaten by something or another. I'm really just playing to get to and see what the assault troops and tanks start looking like, what they play it out as. I'm not really counting on this being that interesting. So in some limited attempt to rectify that situation, I forced the Germans to conduct yet another attack on there. And the losses ended up in line with their reduced strength, which is around 20, and the French improved, which means the losses were really kind of the opposite of what they should be. The difference, of course, being the Germans have a +4 to their die roll, the French only have no plus. So on a questionable die roll, you see results like this: 4 for the French losses and 6 for the Germans. I'm just going to let things stand as they are. But obviously that's not a viable tactic to try to bombard these fortifications once they're defended by artillery. I didn't think it would be earlier on, but I guess I was just grasping for something to do. And didn't bother looking it up specifically, thinking, oh yeah, it's +2 -2, yeah, big deal. No, it's not. It's half and double, and that changes the whole dynamic, because 1 hex doubled and doubled again is about equivalent to what 4 hexes can bring to bear, and 4 hexes halved is about half that. So, you know, you're not seeing a good trade on their investment. So we're probably going to see the French actually hit their morale shattered or damaged or whatever it is, the economic collapse, a little early, because I've gotten them up to 1,250. Of course, my very pacifistic approach to this game, where I don't believe that making those attacks, unless you kind of know you've either got to make them because your supplies are too high, or you see a real opportunity to gain ground, which is unimportant, of course. But what is important is where there's an opportunity to gain ground, there's probably a good chance that you can get the attritional advantage. If you're attacking small stacks with a couple of your bigger stacks, you're going to cause more damage. So those tend to be worthwhile attacks to make. But spending the supplies early and putting yourself at risk, because the attacker is going to spend more supplies, to a counterattack seems foolhardy. If you've got to spend them eventually, unless some special circumstances available, I don't see launching these big offensives. I would be kind of curious to play this against somebody who played it historically. I am constitutionally incapable of trying to mimic, you know, just massing as many forces and hitting the same hex or same couple hexes all, you know, again and again and again until I can't do it anymore, and then maybe keep doing it. Because to match the historical offensives, I think you have to go beyond the supply points and start hitting, you know, as we did during the Schlieffen Plan. But there was a big advantage to the Germans there. They knew they had their opponent at half strength as well. He was out of supply earlier than the Germans were. Without that kind of assurance, it just seems pointless, totally pointless, in the sense that you're putting yourself potentially at a risk of a counterattack, which is kind of what historically happened, right? Allies would launch these big attacks, or in the case of something like Verdun, the Germans would, and weaken themselves so much that they were open to a counterattack. I don't think that kind of play is going to help you in this game, so therefore you're kind of being guided to play the game ahistorically with the, well, what if you were a better general type of implication. I don't think that's fair. I really don't. And my assumption is that what I am doing is actually better. Maybe somebody can comment and say, no, man, I've played this game a number of times, and you get much better results if you do push those armies and you do hit the big spots. I don't believe it. I really don't believe it. The Verdun plan of bleeding the French dry, that may work fine, but there's no reason you'd have to keep hitting Verdun. Why not switch to where they're not focused and hit their lighter troops? Why not shift the front continuously the way I'm doing? I think that's what this game encourages, and I think it's completely ahistorical for it.